So when you're having a good day, what are a few thoughts that you might have about yourself? And write a few sentences describing positive thoughts you are capable of having about yourself. When you're having a bad day, what are some of the thoughts you might have about yourself? Write about those thoughts. Now, see how vastly different your thoughts about yourself can be? Easier to begin to see that the voice is not you. Go back over to the book now. So if you haven't reached the awareness yet, just start to watch. Spend a day watching every single thing that your roommate does. Start in the morning and see if you can notice what it's saying in every situation. Every time you meet somebody, every time the phone rings, just try to watch. A good time to watch it talk is while you're taking a shower. Just watch what that voice has to say. You'll see that it never lets you just take a peaceful shower. Your shower is for washing the body, not for watching the mind talk nonstop. See if you can stay conscious enough throughout the entire experience to be aware of what's going on. You'll be shocked by what you see. It just jumps from one subject to another, to the next. The insistent chatter seems so neurotic that you won't believe that it's always that way, but it is. You have to watch this if you want to be free of it. You don't have to do anything about it, but you have to get wise to the predicament that you're in. You have to realize that somehow you've ended up with a mess for an inner roommate. If you want it to be peaceful in there, then you're going to have to fix the situation. The way to catch on to what your inner roommate is really like is to personify it externally. Make believe that your roommate, the psyche, has a body of its own. You do this by taking the entire personality that you hear talking to you inside and imagine it's a person talking to you on the outside. Just imagine that another person is now saying everything that your inner voice would say. Now spend the day with that person. You've just sat down to watch your favorite TV show. The problem is you have this person with you. Now you'll get to hear the same insistent monologue that used to be inside, except that it's sitting next to you on the couch talking to itself. Did you turn off the light downstairs? You better go check. Not now. I'll do it later. I want to finish watching the show. No, do it now. That's why the electric bill's so high. So you sit in silent awe watching all of this, and then a few seconds later, your couchmate is engaged in another dispute. Hey, I want to get something to eat. I'm craving some pizza. No, you can't have pizza right now. It's too far to drive. But I'm hungry. When will I get to eat? To your amazement, this neurotic burst of conflicting dialogue just going on and on. As if that's not enough, instead of simply watching TV, this person starts verbally reacting to whatever comes on the screen. At one point, after a redhead appears on the show, your couchmate starts mumbling about an ex-spouse and a painful divorce, and then the yelling starts, just as though the ex-spouse were in the room with you. And then it stops, and just as suddenly it started. At this point, you find yourself hugging the far corner of the couch in a desperate attempt to get as far away from this disturbed person as you possibly can. Will you dare do this experiment? I'll stop there. And Michael,
Very
if you're
cute.
talking, I can't. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool way to describe the ego. EGO. If we define the creator as the ancient scriptures do as love, then what this voice that he's so humorously describing does, it's like its main job is edging love out, EGO, edging God out. It's a good an acronym for the ego. And what is it made up of? Well, when you start to work with not the belief systems of the mind, but of the actuality of the creation, at least as close as we can get to it, and we're still using words to comprehend it, so words, of course, are only made up for things we've experienced in the past. We don't have words yet for things we're going to experience in the future. So obviously words represent the past, and the past obviously cannot be the present. However, it pretends to be. This is the great pretender. This non-being self, this ego, pretends it has life, but there is no life there. It pretends that someone else outside of it is the problem, and yet no one else outside of it has anything to do with the content that's held from the past. When you realize that this content, when you realize that we are energetic beings, if we start with the basic premise of the why is this happening to me again work, Albert Einstein says, on such things as matter, we have been all wrong. On such things as matter. Pardon me. What we have heretofore called matter is energy. Energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. There is not a material world. There is an energetic world. When we start to see things through the eyes of energy, then we are able to at least creep toward actuality rather than living out of the realities of the past. When we realize that everything is energy, we have these 5 things we call senses that are nothing but energy receivers. And from the moment you were conceived until this very day, every frequency that enters into what we call your awareness, but really what it is every frequency that enters into your senses. Everything you have a tuning mechanism for, whether you are aware of it or not, is a frequency, an energy. And when that energy enters your structure stores those frequencies. And it stores them holographically in every cell in your structure, which means that it's also stored in the sperm and the egg. And were you to conceive a child tomorrow, that child would have in its structure every thought you've ever thought, every feeling you've ever felt, every reality you've ever engaged in, and the blocks to awareness of those things that you say, I don't want to deal with this, I don't want to feel this, I don't want to think this. And so we have these generational patterns as false interpretations of the present moment. Now, there's a reason why they call the present moment the present. Because when you're there, there is a presence. And that presence is the conscious, active presence of love. If you're not aware of it, it's because you're stuck in this dialogue and the blocks to present moment awareness that have been unresolved in your generations. This impacts your physiology. It impacts your psychology. It impacts your emotions. It impacts your ability to generate accurate realities. It impacts your ability to consciously create your life. So as Michael Singer is mentioning here, it would behoove us each to be able to become aware of those patterns of thought, those conversations. And in the 1st century Aramaic language, the man Yeshua gave a tool for removing those things. And the removal process is called forgiveness. A technology for moving out of your structure those energy patterns that perhaps have been, confounding people in your bloodline for generations and generations and generations. Why did I do this? Why do I act like that? I want to act this way, but I can't. I find myself doing something else. What is the mainspring of our behavior? I'd offer the mainspring of most people's behavior are these patterned thoughts, unresolved, the ones based in hostility and fear, because they're the ones that have the higher level of intensity. They're the ones that tend to take over people's minds, take over people's behaviors and their lives. You know, the child who dreamed of a wonderful, adventurous, sweet, creative life of service, caught up in rage and fear and guilt and hatred and vengeance, becomes a child abuser of their own children, the abuser of those around them, and the abuser of themselves. Why? Because there's a mind energy abuse in this ego structure. Until it's confronted for what it is, and it's just a frequency from the past, until it's removed, it runs the show. And, you know, oftentimes you'll hear people talk about it and they'll say, it wants to do something. And my offering is that this ego self wants nothing. It's just a program. If it's programmed to go out and get money, then it wants money. If it's programmed to fail, then it wants to fail, and it acts against its own best interest. It doesn't really want, it's just whatever's structured into it. Whatever the predominant resonant energy is at any given moment is what runs the show and runs behavior. And you'll notice how often you'll say to yourself, okay, so, gee, I'm going to get with this person and we're going to talk about this issue that we haven't wanted to talk about. And then notice how off the rails your mind can go when what you wanted was a loving conversation to clean up an issue in your lives. Why does that happen? Because of the unresolved energy of people having conversations with each other in your bloodline and going off the rails. And until those processes are confronted consciously and replaced by conscious effort and conscious choices, then the whole system is run by a series of past decisions. This so-called body's mind is nothing but a decision-making device. And a decision, you know, most people think of decision as that's what I decided to do, or they'll oftentimes equate decision with choice. But actually the two are totally and completely different things. Choice is the ability to originate an energy and move your energy field in the direction of fulfilling or expressing that. So if you make a choice to do something new and there are decisions from the past unresolved with all kinds of rage in them, then when you start moving in the direction of fulfilling that which you've originated, up comes the rage-filled mind. And if its basic premise is the decision that's held from unresolved generational energies is, well, we always fail at things like this, so we don't even bother trying, then the mind is going to fabricate. You know, there's a saying in the culture, you make shit up, pardon the French. That's what the mind does. Once there is a predetermined reality that has been patterned, especially if it's been patterned in relationship to the power person, it's a response that's just mimicking the power person, then the mind will make up totally, completely irrational, illogical stories to try to justify what that roommate said. And that roommate just replicated what happened from generation to generation to generation to generation. And the mind will just make it up. And if you really listen to yourself, if you observe this Michael's suggesting, you'll see that there's a conclusion. And in order to feel good about that conclusion, because there's no basis for it in insanity or fact, the mind will just make something up. Something that's totally irrelevant, totally meaningless to the original issue, but the mind will just throw that out like, okay, see, now it's okay if we do this because there's a reason. So as you observe that critter running inside your head, that ego, that non-being self, And if you happen to observe, and I'll just offer it for me, that's what I've observed in myself and others, is it usually takes us away from what it is that we really want and takes us back to the dynamic of the power person, the unresolved trauma and pain of the power person, and what was instilled in us as children in response to that unresolved power person dynamic. So if you realize that you're speaking out of that and you can step back and observe it, as we've suggested many times over the years, become the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions, then you get to go, wow, that isn't me. It's got nothing to do with what I want to do. It's got nothing to do with what I want to create. But man, here it is. Why is this happening to me again? No, it's happening to me again because it's in here. And then the mind goes and makes it up and says, no, it's happening because Bill did this. Oh, now we're back to the one world religion of blame. It's everybody else's fault when my mind is, quote unquote, making shit up, especially if it's based in pain. And so when we wake up to that process and then understand how to collapse that conversation by recognizing that it's driven by a goal. The stresses involved are driven by goals. And when I remove the goal that's driving me into a place where I've finally stepped back and observed and went, wow, look what I just told this person was true and why I was doing this. And it's a total fraud. It's a total lie. It didn't have anything to do with it. I just made it up. So it sounded like I had a reason for doing it. And when that whole dynamic starts to become unraveled, it can lead to any manner of healing crisis. Remember the 4 things that happen that strengthen and empower us or show us that what the mind is doing is processing something from the past. Question, have I been doing more and more of the right things, which means I'm getting more vital? I ask myself the question, had I just reached a new level of vitality? Yes, I'm doing more of the right things nutritionally, emotionally, relationally, exercise, all of the above, forgiveness. Then, yes, I hit a new level of vitality. Now that I'm at that new level of vitality, what's happening with my elimination? Has it increased or decreased? If it's a healing crisis or a healing process, then there's going to tend to be an increase in elimination. If it's a disease process, there's a tendency for there to be a restriction of elimination. You want to be able to observe what's happening with your own structure to be able to tell what's going on. You know, they asked Yeshua 2,000 years ago, how do you tell where somebody's really at? He says, you look at their results. If your results are drama and trauma, and you're making stuff up that really has nothing to do with what's going on at the moment, then it's time to tell that roommate in there that the game is over, that the jig is up. And oftentimes what that roommate will do is offer you a drug. Oh, let's go out and, have a drink. Let's call Harry and go over to the bar. Let's go to the junk food store. Let's go to a fast food place where you can get something that's loaded with salt and sugar and fat, probably degenerating fat like comes from vegetable oils. Sneak around the back door of your local fast food restaurant and look at the buckets of products that they've gone through. Just take a look at the ingredients on the buckets. Look at the hydrogenated fats. Look at the vegetable oils. They have no place in the human body in an isolated form like they just bought a 5-gallon pail of it. So as you start to do the things that vitalize and strengthen you, you head for eating real food, then you realize that the healing process that's going to occur means that you're going to surface what your inner roommate hasn't dealt with, and you're going to work through it. and it's not going to be Dr. Feelgood. And on a physical level, it's going to look like any kind of physical symptom you've ever had and low energy. On a mental level, it's going to look like any kind of negative thought you've ever had and confusion. On an emotional level, it's going to look like any kind of negative feeling you've ever had and depression. That's what healing looks like. So when you start to confront this roommate that Michael's talking about, you're going to have to work through whatever it is that reflects as a fabricated self, a false self that doesn't even exist. And so that's the work we call healing. And we're delighted that you're part of the conversation. Miss Jeanie, does that stir any other thoughts for you?
Well, actually, a confession. The other day, I caught my voice the other day. I don't remember where I was going, and it was like, oh, you could get a cup of Starbucks coffee and have it drunk and throw the cup away before you ever get back home, and Michael won't know.
And Michael will never know.
And then, of course, I told it, no, you don't need a cup of coffee. And, I mean, it was, I actually observed that conversation going on in my head, that voice was trying to convince me to go ahead and get a cup of Starbucks. So, yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yanka just wrote in the chat room, she says, is Michael talking about Michael Singer? And I said yes, that I'd been reading a paragraph or two at the beginning of the show for the last couple of days out of the Untethered Soul. And she said, that's so interesting. I have literally been creating sessions from the Untethered Soul.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
She said she's been working on both Michael teaching today. Oh, she said she was doing the PowerPoint to try to get it to you before Thursday, before the class next week.
Sweet. Well, I look forward to it. Chapter 4 coming up.
And we do have a hand up.
Great. Let's say hello.
Okay, I believe that it is Joe, area code 864. You're on the air. Hi.
Hey, guys.
Hey, welcome, good sir.
Hello.
How do you be?
Me, I mean, I try to make it look easy, but, you know. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Loud and clear. Is that inner voice that says you have to make it look easy?
That's right. I had a similar situation yesterday with feeding the dog. Oh, I better make sure before Susan gets home that I fed the dog. She would expect that. Okay, well, go ahead and do that, and make sure got to do that first so that she doesn't see I didn't feed the dog on time. Oh my gosh, it's like, Joe, so you missed the time to feed the dog. Take it easy.
But that's a perfect worksheet opportunity, because that's your
you
power
and those
person
damn
nagging
worksheets.
you.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, those blessed worksheets. Me and those blessed worksheets. What a gift. Oh, my God.
No, you're right.
Just what I always wanted in my mind, and my inner roommate says, no, don't. It holds up a cross and says, stay away from me with those, because you'll destroy me.
Wow. Whoa, easy.
There it is. That resonates with brain cells, didn't it?
Oh, my gosh, yes. Indeed. Like back in the 70s, those brain cells.
Yeah.
Insecurity came up for me in terms of worksheet. Got one this morning of how I find myself in a situation where a significant other wants to control me, or I feel like there's a bit of this control thing going on, and why, what's up with that? And for me, it falls into the truth is only my thoughts cause the emotional upset, and the thoughts that separate, I use to cause my emotion is that I'm not good enough and I need to be told, what to do or how to be instead of just being my authentic self. I believe the roommate saying, "Oh, you're just a fraud. You're just an actor," and then working my way through the worksheet. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, and Joe, that's one of the first thought disorders that's fed to most of us by our power person. There's something wrong with you. You'll never be good enough. You're a fraud. It's never going to work. And that's one of the most important ones to confront and forgive, remove, because that spins off so many conversations by the roommate and so many issues that it's just uncountable.
Oh, it seems unsurmountable. You find yourself in an avalanche of crushing self-doubt, but then you or I, wake up and say, whoa, hang on a second. This is nothing but a time for a worksheet, and work my way to the forgiveness of this, and welcome that forgiveness to, like Jeanie was saying, being the witness of the false evidence appearing real. There's that whole acronym for fear, and just say, no, wait a second. Here's the truth now. Let's consider the truth. And then, even that can be questioned, and it will figure out ways to question that and so forth. But really appreciate the worksheet, even though there were tough work through. But this one here in particular went back to for me, and my internal compass, and choosing that internal compass, choosing to go back to, I'll never forget it, when we were in Indiana at that Catholic retreat place, and I said to you, hey, Mike, how do I know, I'm doing the right things and so forth? And you said, well, they asked Jesus that question, how do you know you're living, the right life? And Jesus said, by their fruit. That's it. And that was so, at that time, it was like, you know what, geez, Mike, I'm sorry I asked the question, because it really wasn't a great answer at that time. But now it's just so refreshing. It's very like, like a piece of, a nice apple to eat, a nice piece of fruit. You know by the feeling that I get of just the freshness and the wonderful feeling of relying on myself, my internal GPS, I guess, for lack of a better, or like you had just said with this, I'm not edging out God. It's
right. Allowing it in.
Allowing. Yeah.
And let's take that example that you shared about feeding the dog. The voice that barks that at you about, better not get caught being late with feeding the dog. The voice that shouts that at you from the inner roommate is probably a 3-year-old that was standing in front of a disapproving power person that was just pouring who knows what into your mind. And that's the underlying energy. There's a really powerful line in the Course in Miracles that says, you may wonder why you must look upon your hatred and realize its full extent. If a power person was standing in hatred and a child of 3 perceived it as survival, the child just literally energetically just sucked that in, and decades later this inner roommate spews that back out all over us.
Yep.
And that's why it can be so insistent and so painful.
Yeah, that happens, Michael. That's the one thing too that I don't want to not say to people that are listening that actually happens to me, and you feel it, and you go through the forgiveness process, and it's just not a, you're not going to spray some 409 on this and wipe it off. It's going to be time and just being the witness, consistently being that witness. And
yes,
the other thing that's fascinating too, for me anyway, is this. I wasn't sure about this. I heard this word gaslighting, and it comes from a movie years ago whereby this guy gaslighted, or the story is that he convinced his wife that she was crazy, and she wound up in an institution as a result. And that is
a good movie.
A function. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but the idea that you should accept someone else's reality and not your own. Yep. That's gaslighting, and that's it's very easily done because I can doubt myself, I can question myself, and again that questioning, or there it is again of witnessing the ego and watching it bark as we talk about this or that. Right. And in this case, it's like, wait a minute, somebody else's ego is now talking to me and wants to convince me that this is what happened. When I know in my heart and soul and in my own spirit, no, that's not what happened for me. This is what happened. And that may have been what happened for you, but that wasn't my reality.
Every mind produces a reality at every moment.
And that's okay. That's the other thing too, is that the other person, I'm not here to condemn and say, oh, you're gaslighting me. No, it's more of, oh, look at that. That's interesting. Your reality is yours. That's how you understand it to be, and I understand mine as I interpret it to be. And just be in that place of it goes back to, for me, is the place of holding the space of love and being that space.
Yes. Is someone bringing me a different reality, a different perspective on my behavior or what's going on for me, that creates an opening for me to move forward, and there's a space of love there, or is it a space of insistence and repression that's happening? Then you're in the gaslighting mode. But they can look very similar. The key is, what's the energy behind it?
Yeah. Right.
Because oftentimes we can be stuck in a stunted reality, and somebody's there saying, no, that's not what's happening, and that's the thing we need to hear to open up. But what's the space and what's the energy behind it?
Yeah. I heard a good one the other day where, try to meet somebody who's got like a 3 to 5 year old that's the same as your 3 and 5 year old. This aspect of inner child that misinterpreted something, and if those things match up, then you can work together, or at least have some type of common ground, I guess is the way to look at it. But anyway.
Good breath.
And
so I have an invitation. Yeah. I have an invitation for you. Are you ready for an invitation?
Is it table for two up there at the Ryce Cafe?
Well, no, actually, it's a much better meal than that.
Oh, okay.
So with that situation, the dog came up, feeding the dog came up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you want to take it all the forgiveness process is powerful at opening and processing through content. But if you really want to unravel it, what I'd suggest you do, you've got the 12-page codependent or power person worksheet that you did in the Codependence Intensive. I suggest you take that situation and unravel it, because what that sheet does is go to every corner of the construct, or that which constructs the reality that shows up at the moment, and gives you a chance to review it and really interact with it in a conscious way. So it'd be cool if that sounds like an accurate or a useful invitation for you to actually do that, and then it'd be cool to hear back from you on what you found.
Okay. Yeah, that's a motivator.
If that works, that'd be sweet.
Yeah. All right, let me run.
All right, you have less on the friend.
Thank you.
There is only proper behavior in this household. I mean, occasionally Jamie does something like, want to go off and have a cup of coffee when we've agreed we don't do drugs. But hey,
that's what I heard. I heard a rumor.
And I have never, been out
Never.
and gone, gee, I could go get a little bit of ice cream and be finished it and throw the container away before I've never done that.
Never. Of course not.
Never.
But see you guys.
All right, sir. Have a blessed one. Lots of love.
Bye.
Thank you.
What fun.
We have another hand up, and this is actually a Skype caller, so I'm not sure who it is. Welcome.
All right,
to
let's say hello.
Hi, my name's Robin.
Hey, welcome,
Hi.
Robin. How can we serve you? What's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to just call and say how I'm inspired by your show, but also music. Do you all like to sing?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And does that inspire you as well and get you like kind of spiritually in a good place?
It's I think it's one of the purest energies there is music and sound, and what sound does to the nervous system. It's a powerful way to move out of sympathetic dominance into parasympathetic mode where everything functions better. So yes, I'm with you on that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Do you mind, can I get a sample of you singing and then I can sing?
Well, it's not something I do very often over on the radio show, although once in a while I've kicked into a tune, but go ahead.
All right, I'm going to sing a song called Skyscraper that inspires me. You can take everything I have. You can break everything I am. Like a skyscraper, skyscraper. What do you think of that?
I don't particularly have a thought. I was just listening.
Oh. What about, do you know the song Firework?
No, not a tune I'm familiar with. Does it relate to this? Does it relate to the work we're doing with forgiveness? What?
He just dropped off. So I'm not sure.
Hold the space.
Yinka suggests,
call back. Yeah.
Yinka says that she thinks it would be awesome for you and Michael Singer to do a session together.
Is Michael joining and doing the book club? We'll just ask that question, and maybe she can answer.
She said she loves how Michael Singer puts it in about the roommate, and that you have to realize that you've been locked up in there with a maniac.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I think it's great.
So
I think it's great. He does an
she
awesome
said she
job.
usually doesn't get on the show, but her son is over at a neighbor's, and so she got to come on today. So I don't know if, Yinka, did you hear Michael's question? Is Michael Singer part of your book club when you're going over his book? Or have you started that one, actually?
I'd also like to know when you're starting the Course in Miracles, Yinka. You had mentioned in the last book club study that we did that you were doing that, and the invitation was there to perhaps participate. And I would be delighted to do maybe something in the way of an opening to lay some foundation principles for the course to support it moving forward, and then depending on when it is and what our time frame is, get to check in once in a while and share a little bit from the perspective of the course. So that would be cool. And if Michael is coming on live, and who knows, maybe we could create it even if he's not. I'd be open. So any answers to any of those questions, Jeanie?
No, there's not. She maybe had to step away from the computer. We have 16 minutes. Somebody press 1, ask a question, or lead us in another direction.
And if there's nobody with a hand up, I'll pick up from the suggestion that I just made to Joe and say a little bit about this whole idea of a power person. This is a principle that you can hear over and over and over and over again. I teach it over and over and over. I've taught it for better than a quarter of a century, and I still get new insights into this dynamic as I really look at it. And my take is that this single dynamic literally runs most of the world most of the time. And the power person is a person who had more power over your life at some point than you did. It's usually a parent and a child, though not always. Especially seeing as how it's usually the child's mind, it's when a set of realities and behaviors and conversations that the inner roommate will feed back many, many times over a person's lifetime are installed within the child's mind. Often very, very, very early, like 2 years, 3 years. Jeanie and I were in a store, this goes back, 5 or 6 years ago, and there was a woman in front of us, a little boy, probably 2.5, maybe 3, in the cart. And there was a big scene going on over the fact that he wanted to eat some of the grapes that she was buying. And she became pretty intense in interacting with this little kid, obviously Mom. Jeanie and I were behind in line. I said, well, Jeanie, I'll go ahead and get the car and pull up front. So I went out to get the car. And as Jeanie was coming out of the store, this woman had gone ahead and made her purchase and then stepped aside and done whatever she did before she went out the car. So Jeanie ended up being at the door waiting for me when this woman came out with her little boy. And the words she heard from the little boy as they walked by her going out the door were, Mom, please don't beat me. I love you. And I posited the question, what do you suppose was the interaction that, number one, a child of 3 or less even has a concept of being beaten, and number 2, tries to save themselves from being hurt by promising love? Like, you just look at that, and what kind of insanity has gone down between that mother and child? And when that power person dynamic is aroused, of course, there's this helpless little child of 3, maybe weighs 30 pounds, and this adult, 5'7", weighing, 140 pounds, not much that child can do. But what do you suppose happens to the woman in this man's life when he becomes 280 pounds and is a weightlifter? And that power person dynamic of being terrorized into being beaten, what do you suppose is going to happen in that relationship 30 years later when that power person dynamic is aroused in that young man? They'll probably call him a spouse abuser. But is he really? Well, yes, he is. He just hit his wife. But why? What's at the root of it? 3 things happen in order to install a power person dynamic in a child's mind. 1, power person has more power over the child's life than the child does. 2, the power person is not functioning as a human being. It's not functioning as love. And 3, the child perceives the circumstance as survival. When that occurs, The child's energy field, as an energetic being, not a physical being now, but an energetic being, opens wide like a sponge and literally sucks in every energy in the environment. If that power person is raging, then there's just a direct transfer of that energy of rage right into the genes of the child, right into the structure of the child. And of course, the child, coming from the same genetic history as that power person, already had that rage implanted in them at conception, and here it is being reinforced. Once that happens, and if that's not resolved, then that child who becomes the young man who becomes the old man, aged in part by the presence of the disintegrative energy of that power person dynamic. Age is not a function of time, it's a function of energies that we carry within us. That man's behavior is going to be limited to 3 things until he discovers, understands, and forgives the power person dynamic within himself. And as far as I know, there is nowhere else on the planet that you'll find this piece of information. But here are the 3 behaviors, and the behavior that will govern the child's functioning at any given moment, what the roommate will demand that child who becomes the young man, who becomes the old man, the inner roommate will demand when there's little or no stress that he act. He will feed behaviors that reflect what he did to get along with his power person, in this case, this little boy with his mother. What did he do to get along with her? Maybe he developed a sense of humor and was able to make her laugh when she'd get angry, and his way to escape from rage and beatings was to be funny. So now he'll be the clown when there's little or no stress. When stress starts to build, what he'll do is he'll shift into, I don't care if it's 30 years later, if this is not resolved within the mind, he'll shift into doing whatever he did to resist and survive with his power person. And then the 3rd level of behavior, when he becomes ultra-stressed, he will do whatever his power person did to him that he hated the most. And watch the fists start to fly. And he doesn't have a choice about it. He has no idea he's being driven by that inner roommate, by that power person dynamic, and has no idea, no tools with which to change it. So he becomes a repeat offender. Now, if we had a justice system that was based in truth and understanding of what's going on, then instead of taking the spousal abuser who was abused as a child, throwing him into a jailhouse with lots of abuse and punishment, verbal, mental, emotional, psychological abuse, and perhaps physical abuse as well, instead of that, that person, gee, they're a danger, they just really damaged a spouse. Yes, they need to be separated from the society, but do they need to be put into a situation where somebody with a matching power person dynamic of abuse is now the one with the badge and the gun and the stick and does all the same things that were done to them as kids? Healing means that our penal system, instead of being based in penance, and that's the root of the word penal system, what we'll have is we'll have a healing system. And those who act out criminal intentions, criminal behaviors, will be put in spaces where, yes, they are isolated from the culture because they do damage in the culture. That's a reasonable thing. Incarcerating someone that's harmful to the culture, that person should not have liberty. But they don't need more of the same. They don't need to be thrown in a den controlled by people who have the same dynamics going on that just reinforce each other and you go crazy. but rather a space where, yes, isolated from the society because they're a danger to the society, and then disciplined. Now you'll notice we've got a power person world that describes the word discipline as properly beat up. In fact, you'll hear people quote, and they think they're actually doing something sensible from the Bible when they say, spare the rod, spoil the child. In other words, if you don't properly beat a kid, it's going to be trouble. And I can't tell you how many people over the years, hundreds of people I've worked with, and I've heard say, well, things like, well, yes, I got beaten, but look, I turned out all right, never hurt me. No, you have no idea how much it hurt you. You have no idea what you're carrying around underneath that inner roommate voice that has you be so vicious and so violent when the person that you cherish violates a goal that you hold for them, and your stress is elevated to the point where you become ultra stressed, and then you do what your power person did to you that you hated the most. You have no idea how much pain is there until you start to open that. That's one of the purposes of the exercise that I just suggested Joe do, was in the Codependence Intensive. We have a worksheet that's designed to unravel all aspects of this power person dynamic, so that one can be free of that inner roommate's bizarre and insane voice and directives to behavior. The process is called healing. And that's what we're here to support. Miss Jeanie, what's that resonate for you, sweetie?
Well, it would help if I unmuted, wouldn't it?
There you go.
Yeah, I was actually, there was another section in the Course in Miracles that you talked about. You may wonder why it's crucial that you look upon your hatred and realize its full extent. There's another section of it that it says, you can accept insanity because you made it, but you cannot accept love because you did not. You would rather be a slave of the crucifixion than a son of God in redemption. Your individual death seems more valuable than your living oneness. For what is given you is not so dear as what you made. You are more afraid of God than of the ego, and love cannot enter where it is not welcome, but hatred can, for it enters of its own volition and cares not for yours. And then there was another section that says, beneath all the grandiosity that you hold so dear is your real call for help. For you call for love to your Father as your Father calls you to himself. In that place which you have hidden, you will only unite with the Father in loving remembrance of him. You will find this place of truth as you see it in your brothers. For though they may deceive themselves like you, they long for the grandeur that is in them, and perceiving it, you will welcome it, and it will be yours.
Yeah. Powerful. Another part of that passage on, you may wonder why you must look upon your hatred. It talks about the fact that these things don't stand on their own. You know, it isn't just this little 9-bit mind comes up with a reality that's based in hostility or fear, and there it is. It's all by itself. But it's the foundation that's underneath it. It's the energetic patterns, literally from the generations, that make that voice as strong, as powerful as it is. Or maybe I should say, rather than powerful, I should say as loud as it is. These things do not stand upon their own. And that's why when you look at it square in the face, you recognize the goal that drives it, you cancel the goal that drives it, and it collapses, and bingo. Now you're directly in touch with the very root. For that, using the example we were talking about with this little boy that day, you know, that boy at the age of 30 who's ready to, you know, smash his wife in the face because that's what his mother did to him. If he stops, he looks upon the rage that's moving in him. That's a reflection of the rage that his mother had. He collapses that by canceling the goal that he holds, and he drops into the moment of the most intense pain where he knew himself as an infant, as a small child, as the presence of love, and that was violated. And that's tough stuff to embrace and heal. And that's why the inner roommate's got 1,000 excuses to go in 1,000 different directions rather. I love what Carl Jung says. He says people will do anything to keep from having to face their own soul. And this work is about facing it, and facing it from the point of view of the observer that is love and holds the space of love, because when those underlying dynamics are brought forward in the presence of love, they dissolve. They have no power. They're nothing but a voice from the past. No power whatsoever. They just blow away like a puff in the wind. And so that's the bottom line of what we're looking to do, is to really bring forward the set of tools that were so masterfully designed 2,000 years ago to empower each of us to literally remove everything unlike our true nature, which is love, and to live as the presence of love. So joining each of you in that, thanks for joining us at the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Blessings.